right, and welcome to Third Rail Thursday, Derailed, with me, Denny, and this is N Scale Dystopia. This is the least creepy part of my basement, and tonight I am hosting my first live stream and the first honorary guest of Third Rail Thursday. Tonight I want to principally deal with installing some roadbed, which is the most complicated thing I've worked on so far because I need to install some roadbed so that I can remove this roadbed, so I can remove a bridge, so I can build a bridge, so I can lay some track. And that sounds like nonsense. And I decided when I designed this railroad that I would just probably try to make anything interesting really challenging. So that's what we're going to look at tonight, right over there. So why the live stream? Well, if you recall back to maybe the beginning of the year, I said that I was going to do a whole series of videos where I showed my face and tried to connect with you guys. And I said, oh, I'll probably do some live streaming. And then that dream just died on the vine and I didn't bother with it. And a few weeks ago, Kris at Go Via or Go Home got in touch with me and he said, would you like to take over the first week spot of Third Rail Thursday? And my first response in my head was no. And then I thought, you know what? This might be a lot of fun. So anyway, he gave me, I got a week or so to get ready. And this is a lot harder, at least I'm making a lot harder than I think it's supposed to be. Anyway, so here we are. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Third Rail Thursday series, it's been going on for quite a number of years now. And what it is, it's a rotation of different channels that move through the month every Thursday at 8 p.m. And from this point forward, if I recall correctly, I'm going to be the first week of every month, the Thursday night at 8. The second week, or the second Thursday, it's going to be Kris at Go Via or Go Home. The third week will be Mark of M&M Rails. And then I believe the fourth week is called GVO After Dark, which is an free-for-all. It's just pure anarchy and anything goes and anything does go. Anyway, so here we are. I'm in the basement. I want to make sure that I acknowledge a bunch of people who were in here first. Trackside Mike apparently logged in about 2 weeks ago, so I appreciate you, Mike. Brian Ferguson, Floyd Robinson, Sean Pennywise and Miser Railroad, Floyd Robertson, Kris May and Pat Smith. You guys are special. Dundas Junction Model Railroad, Todd, M&M Rails, CP Whiskey Creek, and yeah, and John Garvin and Awesome Possum and Kraus Rails. I think I know who Kraus Rails is. Anyway, yeah, so tonight I'm going to work a little bit on the roadbed as I talked about. Maybe we can chat about different things going on that I'm trying to do with this railroad. Bought a kit. I don't do that a lot. And I also want to work a little bit on the backstory of what's going on with the railroad. And I'm going to do that with zines. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more. Because as you've probably figured out, this is a very loose prototype. And I want to try to create some additional stories around what's going on here. Anyway, let's see. For anyone who isn't aware of what this little project is, this whole channel came to be right at the beginning of the pandemic. Basically, we got locked down. I was very fortunate. I was able to work from home, and I decided to revisit N-scale model railroading. I'd taken a hiatus, like 10 years off, and that happened. And so I went out and I started looking for supplies and kits, and I couldn't believe how much or how expensive everything had gotten. And so I decided to build a really small little railroad, the original Dystopia, and I got a hold of a bunch of Outland Models kits, and I started using those and creating a whole bunch of little dystopic structures. And people really liked it, and so I continued with that. Eventually I outgrew that layout, and I started on the next layout, which was known as the Union Project. And that took up this space, and it was a 2-year labor of love, I suppose. And this past summer, I realized that despite best efforts, I screwed up in a whole bunch of places. Number one, kind of shoddy bench work. And secondly, using acid-based flux for all of my wiring and handling turnouts, and basically they just started falling apart. The wires were falling out from underside of the layout, and so I made the decision in the middle of the summer to tear the whole thing out and start over. And so where we land tonight is I have 3 of 4 zones of benchwork finally complete. The 4th zone is down there, and before I go any further with the benchwork, I want to come back over to this area here, and I really want to get to laying track. I don't want to be caught in a vicious plywood cycle for weeks and weeks and weeks where I do nothing more than use a jigsaw. So I want to be able to move back and forth. And that'll get onto the sort of little backstory that I was mentioning. Before I move over to the next project area, is there any questions from anybody in the chat? I can see that, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people going back and forth. And I'm not really sure if I have to give out a cookie, but that seems to be one of the trends that goes on with the Third Rail Thursdays. All right, so you guys are being pretty quiet. So I'm going to move over and I'm going to show you what I'm working on tonight. And so this is the bridge area. So I decided in my infinite wisdom to design a bridge that moved over. So this is a lazy body of water that's coming through here, and it's very loosely based on a bridge in Hamilton. Now, there's two levels. One's railroad, one is actually automotive, but I've decided I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to put the railroad bridge up here. The best idea I ever had was putting 2 curved turnouts on a bridge, which I'm sure the only person that could maybe confirm that's a true thing might be DJ's Trains. So what is the approach I'm using here? So I have 3D printed 3 sets of abutments, and I have loosely fit in the plywood bridge. And so this is going to become the base of a through girder bridge that I'm going to build. I'm going to keep the plywood in there, and I'm going to laminate the sides with some styrene and 3D printed parts. And so I've actually glue gunned this in for tonight. And so the challenge is that I need to get the bridge dimensions perfect. I need to get it built up, but I also need to make sure that it connects in the same place every single time along this stretch. So tonight I need to put some cork roadbed down and pin it all in place and let it dry. And so once the thing is rock solid and dry, again with the cork roadbed moving right across the span of the bridge, I can go back in with a razor saw and I will separate the bridge from the piers and lift it out. And then I can cut the roadbed around the piers and lift those before I go any further. And that way I can paint the piers with a little bit of roadbed on them so that they're appropriately painted. I can build the bridge, and then when they're all done, I can set them all back in, and the hope is that everything will fit the way it should, because this is more complicated than I needed it to be. And on that point, I made it even more complicated because one of the things that I had said that I was going to do was I was using code 80 turnouts, and there's good reasons for that, but I decided that I was going to use code 55 Pico track. It's my first time working with the code 55 track, and it is amazing. I did a little bit of track laying with it, and it is such a change. In fact, I'm gonna just jump onto that for a second. So this is Atlas code 80, okay? And I've used Atlas code 80 and I've used Atlas code 55. I've used 55 for years. And you're probably all familiar, the N scalers. You can hardly even hear me. Let's take a pause for a second. Is the volume okay on this? Maybe Carly Express, maybe turn up your volume a little bit. Okay, thank you, Mike. So if you are familiar with the code 80, code 55 Atlas track, you're probably used to working with track that is really flexible. And so when you try to put it in place, it springs back. It's sort of a menace to work with, particularly when you want to put it on a turn. The Pico code 55 is like a 2x4. This stuff is super rigid, which means that I can actually bend this and curve it into place on the layout, and it stays put. I have never had the joy of using something as good as this. That said, the problem is that Code 55 track, in terms of its tie dimensions, is different than the Code 80 turnouts. And so I have to use two different heights of roadbed for the track and then the turnouts themselves. And so that's the first part I need to take care of, is getting the roadbed figured out for the curved turnouts. So the way that I am going to take care of that is that I am going to be using some adhesive cork sheets that I found on Amazon. And these are apparently 1 millimeter thick. When I switch cameras, it gets lower. Interesting. Sorry guys, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. So when I switch the camera to the second thing, it is lower. Okay, well, I can't do a lot about it because it's sort of set. I will do my very best for you. Okay, so the cork sheet that I picked up from Amazon is 1 millimeter thick and it's self-adhesive. And it turns out that 2 sheets of this cork is the same thickness as your standard, is the perfect thickness to marry with some standard cork roadbed. And so I'm going to laminate 2 of these sheets, and I'm actually going to trace out my turnouts and then mount those pieces of roadbed first, and then I'm going to come in with the regular cork roadbed and try to get the whole thing put together. So I'm going to laminate these together actually before we go any further. And I pre-tested this, and the adhesive is good. So I'm going to have no problem with these sticking forever. All right, so I'm going to put these together. Perfection doesn't count here. And so the thickness of that compensates for the additional thickness that a curved turnout has. And so I should be able to install that roadbed along here and then marry up to it with the regular cork roadbed that I've got over there. And so I'm hoping that 2 curved turnouts, geez, should I be really wasteful and go across on a diagonal? I don't think that's a good idea. I think I need to be good about saving as much of this cork as I can. And so I'm going to just really quickly trace that out, and then I bet I could use scissors to cut this rather than a knife. Let's see what I've got. Okay, let's see here. So we'll try to cut this out and see how it goes. So in theory, that is a perfect size piece of roadbed for the first turnout, and I'm going to duplicate what I just did and cut out the second turnout. I do have a dull X-Acto knife I could use right now. It's just I don't need to bleed on camera because I typically run the thing up the side of my hand. Although these scissors are flawless right now. And if this works out, I'm going to be actually really pleased, because this is way easier. If you've ever laid cork roadbed for a turnout and you have to do the 3 splices, this is infinitely easier. So these 2 bits of roadbed will need to line up about like so. I think. I gotta check this. Hang on. This is where the making it more complicated than it should be fits in. I also discovered that the first time you put rail joiners on, Pico rail joiners on, you will stab yourself and you will bleed. So by rights, that needs to fit in just about like that. Let me just get up here and take a look. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to go for it. All right, so let's get this down. So I've stripped off the adhesive and we're going to go for it. All right, we've committed. So that bit of roadbed is in place, and by rights, then these should just sit nice and clean. And I need to do a little bit of cutting now. There you go, Pat. So now I can use the X-Acto knife and cut out a bit of roadbed here. I mean, honestly, good enough for who it's for at this point. Okay, so I'm going to stop with that and actually get on to the business at hand, which is now getting the other roadbed in. So what I had mentioned before was, none of this is really tight tolerances. It is really challenging to cut a lot of this, and so this is pretty rough. And so what I need to do is I want to put the roadbed on and get the curves figured out, because these are also pretty rough. Glue that in place, let that go rock hard, and then come back and cut and remove all the pieces. So it'll compensate for the good enough carpentry that I've done here. I got my cork roadbed, which allegedly is in pretty desperate supply right now. Apparently there is a cork shortage, which I guess is like everything else that there's a shortage of. And so I'm going to put this down in place with white glue. Things that I've learned along the way with this particular cork is that when you split it, there is one piece that for some reason, where can I see that, is narrower than the other. And so I've come to learn that you need to put the narrow side on the inside when you install this. It's also, it's almost near impossible to figure out where the bevel is sometimes. And so what I want to do is I want to start with this inside track, and I think I'll probably go about this far. So yeah, probably about like that. I am using regular white glue. However, someone pointed out to me that if I had used regular white glue on some of my bench work, I have made a terrible mistake because apparently it will reactivate with humidity, and as sometimes basements aren't known for their ideal humidity, the bench work is in jeopardy at this point. That remains to be seen. And yes, I am going to put the white glue right over top of the abutment. Because I want to basically get the entire thing rock solid, and then I will cut it apart. And the hope is that when I cut it apart, that'll be the most precise I can make it so when I reassemble it, it's a little easier. Gonna have to lose the glasses for this one. All right. So let's get going with getting some of this put in. Again, for anyone N scaling, I'm using 30 millimeter centers between the tracks, and in the passenger yards, I'm doing 50 millimeters. And so this is where now the cork does a nice job of naturally creating the curve and the easement that I need. Back over here. Let's see. All right. Oh, hey, Bernard Mini Prince is in the chat there. I see him. Okay. So that is pretty much the way that I want it then. I need to do an aerial view myself to see if it looks like it's smooth. It actually looks pretty good. I can't believe I got this with all of this sort of nonsense going on. And I'm going to throw the second piece in here. Okay, so I mean the approach looks good from over there. Let's see, get up really tall here. Geez, I think that looks pretty good on the, I think that looks good. I ran my roadbed across my 1-inch belt sander to clean off the messy edge. Yeah, on the, so that's to Quentin. On the my last layout, I actually got a sanding block with a fairly aggressive grit, and I stuck it down between. I took the edges off with it, and it worked out really well. It fixed it up. Once this is rock hard, I'm going to go at it pretty aggressively with sanding. I did this exact same process down below. This is the lower level track that emerges from a tunnel back here and then gracefully moves under this crazy bridge. And this has been glued down. Exact same process where I glued it right into the abutments, and I'm going to cut it all back out and start working on this bridge itself. One of the other things that I'm adding to the bridge is that I have a series of these small 3D printed supports, and I'm going to sort of haphazardly add them underneath the bridges. So again, it looks a little more rickety than proper. I want it to have sort of a kind of a fall apart aesthetic, to be a little bit less than perfect. So I think the next thing I want to do is then to very seriously get this track sorted where it needs to go. And I think part of that is I need to pin that down so it doesn't move. Yeah, that looks pretty good actually. Okay. All right, I'm happy with that. So I guess the next thing I probably want to do is put this inside piece in, I think. That's what I'm going to do. top. Okay, here's a question, you and scalers. Is code of track the same in HO? How do you mean, Mike? What do you mean by is code the same? So, because I have the same, if you're asking the question, I think you are, does it mean that are you asking then the height of code 55, if you put it beside code 55 in HO, if it's the same height? Because it isn't. There is no code 100 in N scale. I think code 100 in N scale means that the prototypical rail height is about 2.5 feet. Okay, so we're in good shape there. Probably should have checked to make sure that this fits in a tidy sort of way. I'll give this a bit of a trim. Look at that, right underneath the railhead, like I knew what I was doing. Man. What's going on there? I think we face better. Okay, so Pat Smith, do you think that the code 55 will fare better than the other code 55 track you use? Yes, Pat, and I am happy you asked that question. So, I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you well on this particular camera. Let's see if I can make this work over here. Okay, so the rail height for the code 55 track is code 55. But the way that Pico manufactures this track is it's actually code 80. And I don't know if this camera can grab it. No, it can't. And so what it is that a part of the rail is actually embedded in the tie, which is why we were talking about how stiff this is. So if you were to strip the ties off, you would see code 80 height track, but all that's visible is code 55. So what it means is that if you have old rolling stock with like the old pizza cutter wheels, it'll actually run on this because the inside is lower, if that makes sense. You're not going to bounce along on the rail spikes and such. So yes, this is going to fare a lot better than the Atlas track. I'm a bit of a convert. I will also say that this track was rather expensive. Yeah. All right, so back over here, there, is that a little doodad in there? Something maybe got caught up. Aha. There. All right. That looks better already. So what I'm going to go do is like, so in this particular spot here, the roadbed is out past a little bit of the plywood, so I'll have to build that out before I put the girders along the side. Same over here. I couldn't design this very effectively. Yeah, the Pico track is definitely more costly. I used Atlas code 55 switches on the layout previous to this one, and they were really easy to wreck. Makes it ideal for your piano. A lot of manufacturing. Yeah, Rose's Trains is 100% right. I feel like the preoccupation with fine scale in North America is a little bit different, excuse me, than Europe, and so yeah. All right. Yeah, Pat, I also follow that same channel. I have an acquaintance that went to Japan not too long ago, and he was bragging about how cheap the Kato store is there, or Kato. Trackside Mike, nothing against Atlas, but their switches are you know what. Yes, and I know where we can put them too. That was my last experience. No offense to Atlas. Well, maybe some offense to Atlas. We'll see. Okay, so that is now... Okay, I'm good with that. So then I need to get the second rail in here. And I need to now sort that out, which is interior, exterior. So I probably should do a little bit of surgery in here. I realize this is super accurate. One of the things, I'm trying to set rules for how I'm going to approach this layout. And by rules, I probably just mean to say best practices. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the track is actually painted and weathered before I do anything else. So I am being a lot more deliberate about this particular layout. So the first thing is that it will be wired for DCC. It'll originally run for DC as I make that transition, but every piece of flex track has feeders on it, and so every 3 feet there is a feeder. I will only be soldering joints on the curves. So feeders, solder joints only on curves, expansion gaps everywhere. Like, I don't want to do this again like I did the last time. Yeah. All right, so let's see. Maybe I'll just bring this in a little bit. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to try to get some roadbed stuffed in there. Yeah. Let's see if I can make this work by just using a pair of scissors and trimming up some roadbed. And we'll cut this down. Yeah, the only, Mike, one of the things, the criticism against the Pico track is the way that it looks. Apparently the tie spacing is more European. There's a greater space between the ties. North American track, generally speaking, has closer tie spacing, and so for some that's a bit of a deal breaker. It doesn't look as prototypical, and I appreciate that, but that was not a concern for me. Okay, how do we feel that we did there? I think that is decent, so let me give that a bit of a trim, and we'll get that glued in place as well. Pico track, oh yeah, Pico track. Quentin, I used all Atlas 80 track and switches. Switches are like speed bumps to some of my rolling stock. I had a lot of trouble with their crossings, their 45s and stuff. It really did lift the wheels, and so a lot of the passenger equipment would leap into the air as it made its way across some of the track. Which is why I moved to handling my track. I thought, you know what, I'm going to be a Puritan and handling my track. And I really did enjoy the experience. Had I done it correctly, I would have probably really enjoyed the experience. But, you know, live and learn. So this isn't critical in here because I'm going to ballast everything. But for the time being, let's see if we can't get this. Okay, I am really pleased with this now. Spacing's broad here, but that's on purpose. I realize that the view that you guys have is thrilling. Wow, okay, doing well. Wathers hates N Scale, so not a problem with me. Kris is out here speaking the truth. Pat, hand laying your track, honestly, I really did enjoy it. Like, I wish I did enjoy doing it. It made you be very thoughtful about your yard design and such. And then you would sit down and, you know, hand laying the track became the turnouts was very inexpensive. I think it worked out to maybe $3 a turnout. And after the initial outlay of buying the jig, but what I did find over time was that, again, I didn't do it correctly, and it's easier to hand lay higher number turnouts. So number 8s, number 10s, those are easier. When you get down into the more minute numbers, you know, 6s and 4s and such, it's actually really challenging to bend the point rails accurately. Okay, so let's just come over here a little bit. So this spot over here is a bit of a dog's breakfast, and that's something that I need to figure out tonight. So what is going to happen scenically, and I wish I had a better view of these for you here, bear with me. So these are stacked stone abutments that I 3D printed. Most of this abutment is going to be hidden behind scenery. So the grade will come down in front of the abutments and sort of stop maybe about here. And so this is going to make its way up, and then I'm going to have rock faces that come out like this. So right now, this sort of like precarious little ledge that I'm building into it will be a non-issue. By the way, I hope that you're not using acid-based flux this time around. Okay, Pat, getting a little bit spicy, are we? Yes, I can assure you that this time around I purchased the appropriate rosin flux paste. Right there, you see that? Rosin flux paste. And I will say it's hot garbage compared to acid flux. The beauty of the acid flux paste is that it just cleans everything so well. It cleans it so well that it blows it apart later in life. Okay, so this is the one I don't want to do. So let's see. Get that tacked in there. And then I need to just let this thing do its own work and sort itself out. I think that'll do. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, this is a bit of a mistake here. You can see that the roadbed's coming right over top of this, so I'll have to go back in and fill this in. And in fact, this is probably going to be filled almost completely in. The new layout design is operationally interesting. I can't wait to see more on it. Listen, it is, I agree with you. I am really excited to see this thing come to life. I do like working on the things that I'm working on right now, but man, it's going to be a long road before I get to the actual running, which is why I'm going to, hopefully find some other little side projects to keep me interested, because I could see that this would be pretty mind-numbing. I watch some of these channels where the guy's like, we're in year 3 of building bench work, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how you manage this. I'm not saying I'm impatient. I'm just saying I'm not patient for everything. Let me see here. Attracting the proposition flux many. Yes. I probably should have spoken to James at Dundas Junction about solder and flux. James, I just dove in. I didn't realize I made a mistake. It's sort of like when I used the wrong flux, it was one of those questions that I didn't know I should be asking that question. David Godin. I live in Hamilton, use the Aldershot for my daily commute in the city. I'm very excited to see your New West Harbor Aldershot Union layout come together. Thank you very much. I live about 35-40 minutes north of Aldershot in big Cambridge City, and yeah, it is basically, my heart is there. That is my train station and my train area, so I was really excited to incorporate it into this new layout. Go at your own pace. Yeah, no, I'm going to. I just know who I am. I use 18. Denny, I'm ready to... Trackside Mike is ready to tear down his layout. Listen, it feels good. It's also amazing how quickly you can take a layout down. I'll tell you, it was something else. When I did my little layout and put it up by the curb, I was amazed for the number of non-model railroaders in the area. That thing disappeared off the curb in about 5 seconds. It was also a great meeting at the train show. Hey, I appreciate that. 18 gauge. So we're having a wire discussion here, it looks like. Trackside, might I use 18 gauge? Flux from the electrical supplier. Okay. So the last piece I need to sort out is this guy. What do I got here? Do I have a piece that's short enough? No, I want a bigger piece. All right, be right back. Get another piece of roadbed. Matthew Harris, hello. Do you have snow where you live? Because where I live, I think we got 3 feet of snow. All right, so you're clearly north of me. I think that we got about 5 centimeters of snow in the past 48 hours. Not a big deal. My brother has a place up near Bala Bay, and that's the part of northern Ontario where they got something like a meter or 3 feet. That doesn't mean for the amount of snow that we got these last couple of days that people didn't forget how to drive. It was an absolute bloodbath on some of the roads. Okay, I'm going to take out a little bit more there. Oh, that's good. One of the challenges I've had with this new layout plan is that transferring it to the table. There is a YouTube channel which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, and I don't remember the name. I think his name is Peter, and he builds some of the most insanely beautiful benchwork I've ever seen, like a cabinet maker basically. And then he has the ability to then roll out the track plan as just a large format printout, and that is really nice. This has been all with chalk lines and compasses I make out of chunks of plywood, and so that's why I'm relying now on the cork roadbed to do some of the work for me, to actually build in some nice smooth curves. Okay. Actually, that's really, I'm super happy with that. So in terms of layout design, this area over here that you can't see so well, this is my fictional Stewart yard, and the main line runs along here. And so if I want to do anything in Stewart Yard or Hamilton Station, this is where I can break off into there. So for the most part, the main line isn't fouled by any of that. And so the intent is that I'll be able to switch through Stewart Yard or just collect really expensive pieces of rolling stock from Rapido and load them back there. But the idea is that I can then have continuous running and this entire area won't foul the main line. All right, and so I just have to do one last little bit here, and that will do. And I cut on the wrong side of the cork, so let's try that again. So I'm thinking something like about that. I can live with that. Okay. Yeah, all right. Hang on, son, I don't want to. Okay. I can't believe that actually solved itself. Interesting. I apologize if I just sit here and muse to myself for a little while. Actually, that's a big, okay, well, let's see here then. So then it diverges into where it needs to go over there. And that's basically all the pins that I have. I lost the rest of my pins, and when you do straights, that's totally fine. But for right now, that's really great. And so that's going to set up and harden. I may go over it with a bit more white glue just to soak it down. Like, I want this to be rock hard and perfectly attached, and then I'm going to cut it away. And over the course of this month then, for the end of December, I want to have scratch built or kit bash these 2 bridges and have them installed. That's the goal. So then once the abutments are painted and the bridges are built, then I can actually continue laying track. And I would love to, for late this year, which is only a few weeks away, or early next year, be able to have some trains moving back and forth here even before I complete the bench work on that side. In terms of the bridge that I'm going to build, a while ago I did a project where I built a bridge using tongue depressors, and I 3D printed, let me see, maybe this side works a bit better. I 3D printed the girder panels, not even the girder panels, just the ribbing, and I was actually really happy with the way that looked. So for this particular bridge, I'm going to add strip styrene along the side of the plywood so that it hangs a little bit below and about 4 scale feet above. And then I'll add the ribbing to it. And I'm hopeful that once it's rusty and covered in vines and some graffiti, that you won't know that it's just half-inch fir plywood. Okay, so I'm really happy that turned out the way it is. And for anyone who needs a bit of a reminder, that represents this area right here, which at this particular scale leaves a lot to be desired. But this is the lazy body of water that I'm putting in, and my hope is that as you enter into the room, this is what you're going to see, which is this bridge crossing over itself. And this area behind here is a lazy river that I want to turn sort of around this corner. I want it to jut out, and then I'm thinking I might put a mirror against the wall. And when you come in, I spent days doing this, you won't be able to see the mirror directly. And so hopefully I can create this scene that seems to go around the corner. I originally didn't set out to create sort of a signature scene like that, but I've been to so many railroads where they put one nice piece of scenery. I'm looking forward to it. So, one of the questions I don't get a lot about here, but I get a ton of questions about elsewhere, is this sort of preoccupation with these guys. The gas mask character, the little graffiti warrior. And so one of the things that I like to assume with this build is that, so if you've watched, so let's start again. So I'm not really concerned about era. You know, if you've ever ridden or seen the Canadian, the Via Rail passenger train, infamous passenger train, it is using Bud cars that were built like in 1957. So the idea about running era-specific cars kind of goes out the window, because Via Rail just likes to drag things for 70 or 80 years. They do refurbish them, but they're old. The LRC cars that have been refurbished are also quite old. It's really the new Siemens Venture train sets that are finally sort of the new addition. So all that is to say that I'm not very era specific. I want to run what I want to run, which is important to me. And the feeling is that I want to create a bit of a lore or a backstory here, because that's what makes me happy. You know, like, I like having something to work from. And so the gas mask guys that keep showing up, it's sort of like, so if this is going to be dystopic, my thinking is that maybe there was, I don't know, some sort of economic collapse or some virus or something like that. Late stage capitalism failed. And really the only mode of transportation left is trains. People can't afford a car at this point. And so this sort of a doldrum, empty, hallowed place where people just sort of move about. And our little characters there are reporting back to us, so to speak. And, you know, they wander the streets and they, you know, they're tagging stuff and they're our eyes into this world, kind of, and they report back. And so one of the things that I have been doing for fun is I've been working on what they would call a zine. And I'm not sure if that's something that you guys are necessarily familiar with here. But zines are little self-publications, and they were really popular like in the 30s and 40s because people would write science fiction. And then they gained popularity in the 60s and 70s with the punk movement. They were a big deal in the punk movement. And then they were really popular again in the 80s and 90s for the women's movement. And they've always just been the idea that you would self-publish. Like you hate the government, and so now you could go and you could self-publish. And the beauty about the zine was that they were photocopies. So 8.5 by 11, you would design your little, you would do your design. And there was a point in time where you could go to the convenience store and you could fire nickels into a photocopier. And so what would happen is that you could then draw out your magazine on a sheet of paper, you would take it down to the convenience store, fire in a couple bucks worth, and now you had something you could distribute. Indie bookstores would carry them. And so one of the things that I've been doing is that I've been working on making a little zine for this railroad. And I'm cutting apart old model railroad craftsman and model railroad magazines from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and, you know, making these little narrative stories inside these little magazines. And the idea is that these fellows over here, you know, are moving through these abandoned buildings or whatever they're finding. I mean, I'm going to assume there's buildings with some people in it, but other buildings are abandoned. And so then they're making these publications, and I don't know, they're going to a Quickie Mart and they're photocopying and they're leaving at the stations, you know, because subversive fight culture kind of stuff. And what it does is that it lets me, while I'm doing the bench work and I still like, do something sort of creative elsewhere. And so tearing apart these old magazines and making these little zines is really fun for me. You know, I do have a fine art background, and so trying to do creative things all the time brings me quite a bit of joy. And certainly while I do like doing the bench work, you might imagine it's not very fulfilling at times. That's not, well, less fulfilling than it could be. So I'm going to be sending these to members. I've got some members. I'm working on some stickers. I'm going to throw these in envelopes. And one day, our postal strike will end, and I'll be able to send these things out to people. And that way, you know, if I've got a boring winter break evening, I can pull out some magazines and I can smash away and put some little magazine pages together. The other thing that I can do is I can doodle out some ideas. You know, if you've paid attention to things I was interested in, the previous version of this railroad, Union Station was it. Like, I was going to build Union Station, and I've drawn Union Station like 5 times, and like how to condense it. Because for anyone who isn't familiar with Toronto's Union Station, it's big. It is long and sprawling. And I've been in it dozens of times, and I still find it wildly confusing. You enter into this building, and you go into the catacombs, and you arrive somewhere else. And so I was going to build Union Station. I was going to build Union Station. I was going to build Union Station. And now I'm going to kit bash Union Station. And so it's not because it says Union Station, but it is sort of close to Union Station. Kits are expensive. I'm going to break this down a little bit and turn it into my version of Union Station. So I'm going to make that frieze a lot smaller. I want to put the green roof on it, maybe the curved sort of end light on it. And part of me is considering buying a second kit, selling a kidney, buying a second kit, and extending it so that it is longer, which is more like the prototype, if it comes to that. I don't know yet. But that's definitely also a winter project. So if you can imagine, I've got the bench work. I'm screw nailing that all together and gluing it and worrying. I've laid a little bit of track. I'm banging away on doing some roadbed. I'm working on a little zine and I'm kit bashing buildings. You know, that's sort of how I want to approach making stuff. The other thing I'm thinking about, now that it just strikes me, is there's a water tower near Exhibition, the Mr. Christie water tower. And it is, what is it? I guess it's left from the Mr. Christie cookie site or something like that. And it's like a landmark. It's like this subtle landmark. And I thought, you know, I'd love to build a water tower. And I thought maybe that would be another great kit bashing project. So I actually raided the dollar store to try to find things to make a water tower. And so maybe I'll be doing that over the Christmas break. There was a whole Reddit post because that Mr. Christie water tower was this icon. Someone climbed it and tagged it. And, you know, basically the society called for the death of that person. And I find it mildly humorous. So yeah, so maybe I'm drawing out plans for how I want to build that tower. Then I'm photocopying them, throwing them a little bit of a zine, sketching out how I want to put a roof on that, documenting that, putting them in little booklets, photocopying them and sending to some people. Like, that's sort of the approach. Let me see. We've got some more comments. I wasn't paying attention to you guys. Thought those were for airbrushing without a spray booth. Yes. Bum, 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 bum. My wife makes steampunk clothing and has sold some diesel. Yes, for sure. Yes, it's still there. To CP Whiskey Creek, yeah. If you're talking about the water tower, yeah, it's absolutely still there. Yeah, the fireplace flames. Yeah, Mike, the fireplace. It's warm down here. Really warm. That fireplace is 100% HD, and it is going strong. It's an 11-hour stream for fireplace. I turned off the crackle sounds because I find them a little bit too disconcerting. So that's most of what I actually wanted to do tonight, and I think I managed to be pretty successful with it. I am really happy with this. This has bothered me for a while because I couldn't effectively draw the curves. And the cork does all the work for me now because it actually does the sort of gradients in the easements. And so now I feel a lot better about this. So tomorrow or the next day when this dries, I'll take my razor saw and I'll slice around and pick the entire thing out, and then I'll take it back to the workbench and start putting these side girders onto it. Genuinely love how you're able to make quality structures out of stuff you get at the dollar store. You know, I do like the challenge of being resourceful. It is fun to me. And, you know, I'm very lucky that I've got a very decent hobby shop locally, semi-locally, but it's still an hour away. And the truth is that N Scale, you might have figured out if Rapido is a barometer on society, doesn't necessarily get the love it deserves. I'm not saying it's the superior scale. I'm just saying that it takes a certain sophisticated individual to work in a discerning scale like this, and so the scratch building stuff becomes part of the part of the necessity, if we say. You know what? I think that this has been a lot of fun, and I do appreciate you guys joining me tonight. Things worked out really well. I'm happy that I got to share some of these ideas. I have the dubious pleasure of then hosting the next first Tuesday of the month, and that is going to be January 2nd. And so after you guys recover from New Year's, you're going to be hanging out with me again, and I invite you back. It's a good time. And we're going to try to figure out what I'm going to do that night as well. So yeah, I think, you know what, I'm going to end it here. I do appreciate you guys swinging by. I appreciate all the comments, and This has been a lot of fun, and I hope to see you guys at all the other streams that happen here in southwestern Ontario. Have a great night, and I'll see you next time.